3,000 of you subscribe, but only about 200 are getting notifications, so click the bell and click all. Hello lovelies, I've upped the resolution for this video and I've changed the lighting around. Someone was complaining about sharpness and lighting and stuff last time, so on one of these videos, so hopefully that fixes things for you. Also, since people like to comment on my hands a lot, I have a blister on my thumb. I got that from going walking for an hour with the walking stick, so now you know and you don't need to ask about it or say that I've got hand syphilis from fingering a Mexican chihuahua or something. Alright, it's a blister from walking because I was essentially bedridden for a year and my skin is even more delicate and writerly than it once was. Okay, preamble done. Spelljammer. Yeah. Now, I always felt when Spelljammer came out, you know, I was in my very serious role-playing phase at the time, and it always felt a bit stupid, and I just wasn't that into it. Dark Sun, I love. Planescape, I love. Even though D&D isn't really my jam, believe it or not. But Spelljammer kind of passed me by, so I was never as attached. So there's probably a whole bunch of egregious errors and issues and problems in the new Spelljammer set that I am missing entirely. So feel free to inform me and other viewers in the comments. You know, I like to think of myself as a recreational sadist. Alright, that's the side my bread is buttered on, but I keep buying D&D stuff. So I really must be somewhere in there a masochist, or at least a very rare switch. Yeah, Spelljammer, it's not great. It's very obvious that this is the smouldering fag end of 5th edition, and they're gearing up towards One D&D. It feels very, yeah, shove it out the door, it's nearly finished sort of feel to it. Alright, let's let's squeeze this turd out. Right. This is the box set, not the alternate covers. Though generally I do prefer the alternate covers, it's just not worth waiting and so on. I buy the D&D stuff incidentally because I run the tabletop-less games, which are in D&D, so I like having the options and the content to refer to. Not through any particular love of Dungeons and Dragons, it's the big game that everyone understands, everyone plays, it's the thing that gets the viewers. So when you're DMing on a commercial basis, Spelljammer, D&D, you know, these are the things you need to keep on top of. Plus, you know, it makes good content for the YouTube channel. Though I spend more on games than I make from YouTube. So yeah, this is the box set slipcase edition. Got a bit battered in transit, thank you Amazon. I really must remember to order from places like Leisure Games more often. Leisure Games, if you're in the UK, I consider to be the best role-playing store in the country, and they do excellent mail order stuff. So yeah, Leisure Games. Wayland's Forge is also good. Other game stores are available. Support your local game store. So what do we get in this slipcase? Which is convenient because it means you can throw all the books away in one go. You get a GM screen. Why you particularly need another GM screen, I don't know. I guess it has some more useful information for specifically Spelljammer. But weirdly, it kind of leaves out all the normal stuff that you'd need to reference, squeezes a couple of actually useful things off to one side, takes up pointless space with the ship air bubble stuff and the astral planes, and then gives you a bunch of encounters, which you're probably never going to use because random encounters in kind of class level based games don't necessarily make a great deal of sense about what you're getting into. But yeah, it's nice. It's very kind of Magipunk vaporwave, I suppose. Yeah, it's okay. It's just there's a lot of space taken up with shit that's useless. So not a great thing to add in. What else shall we look at? Oh, okay. There's an adventure. I mean, for me, this is always a complete waste of time and money, pretty much. The only use I really have for pre-printed adventures is if I'm feeling like a lazy fuck and don't want to add anything, make anything up. But particularly Wizards published adventures always leave me kind of disappointed and annoyed. What it does contain, though, are a few more specific monsters and encounters that you can nick and drop in somewhere else, and stuff that probably should have been in the Monster Manual extension for this. But, you know, all I really get out of these adventures is that I don't want to run my games in the way that they seem to think they should be run, and some NPCs, some locations, things like that. So you can rip out a few useful bits here and there, but an adventure's an adventure. If you're an experienced GM, it's just not that useful to you. Even if you're not an experienced GM, I think this adventure's pretty lackluster. Mostly just a sort of string of largely arbitrary combats. 4th edition disease, I guess you could call it. So, meh. Let's save Boo's Astral Menagerie for the last. Okay, so we have the Astral Adventurer's Guide. At a mere 60-something pages, none of these books contain a wealth of information, which is kind of forgivable. You wouldn't want to repeat a lot of stuff, but it really feels like they should be bigger, because a lot of stuff seems to have been left out. The good parts, I suppose, are the kind of quick, hand-holdy introduction to the concepts behind Spelljammer, ideas for a first adventure to get people out and into the Astral Sea and everything. As with most Wizards releases, the stuff you really want, the stuff you're really likely to be more interested in, are the character options, the new races, that sort of thing. That's what's probably going to be the most useful, the most interesting for you, though I can't help but feel that the ever-expanding menagerie of races across D&D and their habit of making anything playable in anything is getting a bit too bloated. You know, choice paralysis, and if you're concentrating on a more traditionally fantasy setting rather than Spelljammer, where a panoply of races works much like it does in science fiction, you know, it can start to feel like an imposition. You know, if you're running a more standard fantasy world of elves and dwarves and humans and orcs, and someone comes along wanting to play a Hadozi, how do you meaningfully incorporate that? Or you feel disempowered to stand up to players about their choices and say, no, I'd really rather you didn't play that. Yeah, it really takes it away from you. So we have the GIF, who are hippo men, explorers, have black powder weapons, that sort of thing. I like to play them up as stereotypical Victorian British sort of creatures when I RP them. We have the Hadozi, which are these flying squirrel, monkey, lemur people. I'm lucky in that I got the original racist edition So I have the one with the problematic language and everything in it, and oh god, you can go back and look at previous videos where I think I commented on that, or find plenty of discourse online about how stupid it is to assume that just because they're monkeys that it's somehow a racist caricature, and this is apparently a black and white minstrel show reference rather than a flying monkey playing a lute. Think of the poor artist here. I don't know which one it was. You're given a brief, draw a flying monkey playing a lute. You do that, and then out of nowhere you get accused of referencing black and white minstrel shows and, you know, the racism of decades past. Surely any ethical employer would talk to the artist and maybe, you know, stand up for them that this isn't racist, this was never intended to be racist, it's a monkey playing a lute. What are you talking about? I hope the artist doesn't feel too bad about it. I hope they're not the kind of flaccid shrink dick who decides that they have somehow taken on board invisible racism, that they have, you know, subconscious biases and things, and I hope they're not now checking themselves in for a racial awareness course or anything. It's a flying monkey. It's a fantasy race from a fantasy world. It's fantasy. Fuck off. That should increasingly be our answer to these concerns from people. And Wizards, you can't win. Stop trying. You will never placate these people. Plasmoids, yeah. Intelligent slimes and oozes who don't care. Really, don't strike me as particularly playable or interesting or something that you could incorporate into an existing world. It's nice to see the Thrykeen. Is that a hint they're doing Dark Sun? I kind of hope that they don't, to be honest, because they'll fuck it up, same as they have every other setting they've redone. But I've always had a soft spot for the Thrykeen, which is ironic because they don't really have any soft spots, what with carapace and everything. Then we get into the descriptions of how spelljamming works, how spelljamming ships work, the various concepts and things that go along with that. I don't really want to retread a lot of ground that other people have gone over, but there are all sorts of problems with the ways in which this is described as working. The different speeds things move at in different situations. It's sort of interference, the distinct lack of ship versus ship rules. Yeah, it's just missing a whole bunch of stuff that you will probably have to go back and buy second edition materials from DriveThruRPG to fill in the gaps or to replace what's missing here. So like I say, there's no ship-to-ship combat, there's no ship creation rules. It's distinctly lackluster. And it goes over things way too quickly and uses very small random tables in place of more expansive creativity that would be more useful. Like, okay, if you want to go fishing in the Astral Sea, right? 1d10 doesn't really cut it. What else might you catch? Why not have a much bigger list of sort of ideas and concepts, or multiple tables? Do you catch a fish, an inanimate object, a drifting living being, flotsam, jetsam, wreckage? You know, much more. There's more you could do, but they don't do it, and the artificially low page count probably has something to do with that. New circumstances include things like weightlessness, travel between worlds, and so on. What I would do probably would be to compress the scale and keep the movement more in line with slightly faster ocean-going ships. So the moon isn't millions and millions of miles away, it's a much more reasonable distance away, it's just you have to be able to fly to reach it, right? too far to fly under your own power because you die of hunger or whatever, but somewhere you could reach in an ocean voyage. Those kind of timescales, right? But no. So what a Spelljammer is, the various ways to steer one, weightlessness, where the air comes from, how it goes foul, the ways in which large objects interfere with spelljamming effects. At least you've got crashes, I suppose. Now, rather than present you with ship creation rules and relegating example ships to a monster manual extension, instead we have space that would be better used on those creation rules, used to describe particular kinds of ship, right? And frankly, they don't seem tough enough to me. There's no damage reduction in 5th edition, which there probably should be. What there is instead is a sort of minimum damage threshold, such as you have for objects. So let's just take the first one, okay? We have a ship, Bombard, built by the GIF. I just realised that's really confusing with Gith, which is why I paused for such a long time there. You know, this is a big thing with a huge great cannon and all of this stuff, right? It only requires a crew of 12, which, if you know anything about the Age of Sail, seems ridiculously small. It has 300 hit points. That's really not that much when you consider how much damage fireballs and things can do. The AC is a bit high for a gigantic object. The damage threshold is high. You have to do at least 20 damage to do any damage to it. But it would make more sense, I think, to use that as damage reduction rather than a threshold. Yeah, that's a kind of quick fix. But this is a problem I've noticed in a lot of newer games. Cyberpunk, for example, vehicles cannot take enough damage. You can plink away at a car with a 9mm and break it quite quickly and easily. It's like they missed off a 0 or something on the damage that things can take. Not quite that severe, but pretty bad. And the same problem here. Large objects, vehicles, fortifications just don't really seem to fit into 5e D&D without some severe tweaking, and this goes for all of these ships. You know, we're in the absurd situation where you would be better off strapping a player character to the front of a ship because they'd be more likely to survive a ram than the ship would in a lot of ways. Okay, it doesn't work, and as far as I'm concerned, most of this is wasted space that could have been used to provide some ship creation rules, at least some basic ship creation rules. And then you could relegate the specific ones to stat blocks in the Monster Manual extension. I mean, look at all of this. It's just, compared to how useful ship creation rules would have been, this is essentially useless, wasted space. How many pages? Good God. Right, this isn't expanding on the world, it's not giving you more information, it's not giving you more useful rules. It is just stat blocks for ships that really only need to be that big with a description, right? And instead it's 2 pages for each one, and it's from page 26 through to page 57. That is all essentially wasted space that could have been used on ship creation rules. But no. You get a basic starting location, which again I kind of feel is a bit of a waste of space compared to more information that could have been given on ship creation, ship combat, thinking those things through properly and so on. But I'm not going to complain too much about that. It's always useful to have a starting point. And you have a big fold out map of that starting location, and I believe on the flip side the Astral Sea, but I haven't taken it out yet, and I'm not going to because it'll get damaged because the cats are in a bit of an uproar. So Meh. Obvious mistakes are made throughout this entire book, and it doesn't contain the more useful information that you really need. Boo's Astral Menagerie, on the other hand, is probably the most worthwhile book out of the ones that we have available here. Everyone remembers Boo. Go for the eyes, Boo. And it is what it is. It's monsters, more expanded, random encounter tables. Things that probably should have been available as player characters, but which aren't necessarily. But yeah, this is where the good stuff is. This is where the monsters are. This is where the most useful things are. Of course, class and level systems tend to mean that monsters only have a certain degree of usefulness, but what are you going to do? Now, why aren't the Dowa playable characters? Not that race stats really mean anything in D&D anymore, but I would love to play an intelligent penguin. Noot. Yeah, I mean, there's not a lot to say here. Some of these are really interesting and good. Some of them are useful, some of them are useless. As usual, it's a bit of a mixed bag, but it's nice to have monster options. It's always nice to have monster options. And there's plenty here to whet your appetite. Have the Neogi, because they were horrible slavers, if I remember correctly, in the original material. Have they changed it? I can't remember. I don't see any immediate mention of it. I'm fairly certain that the original Yogi were horrible slavers whose rank was something to do with how many slaves they had, and it does seem to have been left out. Embrace tradition, second ed, much more expansive and useful information, possibly too much. But yeah, okay. It's monsters. Again, probably not enough monsters, because again, it's kind of artificially limited to that 60-page sort of level. Alright, so I'm gonna mark the whole thing as a set, but let's recap. A pretty but largely useless GM screen. You would need to have this and your normal GM screen for reference if you're someone that needs a lot of reference at the table. An adventure that's not very good. You either find these things useful or you don't. I don't. Except for the monsters and NPCs and a couple of locations that you can rip off or encounters that you can use in something else. Astro Adventurer's Guide. Glaring omissions throughout. Not enough of anything. Too short. Probably could have been twice the size. Useful in that you have new races and background options and stuff like that. But otherwise, hasn't done it justice. As far as I can tell. Remember, I was never hugely into D&D, and in particular, never particularly into Spelljammer. Astral Menagerie, as useful as any other monster book is, really. And that's kind of the trend with the settings that they put out. It's usually the monster book and the player options that are where the flavour is, where the goodness is that you can extract and use in your own games. So, considering all of them together, style, I mean, you can't fault their presentation too much. If anything should have been out there and really bright, sort of high contrast, engaging images, you would think it would be Spelljammer, right? But the interior art still feels wishy-washy. This style that they've gone for throughout their books isn't necessarily suited to every setting kind of almost watercolory in a lot of ways. It lacks a lot of colour. It's not particularly evocative. It's not very vibrant for the most part, and that lends what should be wacky stupidity, which is what Spelljammer is known for. It lends it a sort of dullness that sucks the life out of it. I mean, the art is all very competent. It's all very well done, but it just feels like this kind of unifying stylistic choice that Wizards have made and artificially imposed is particularly harmful to Spelljammer, which of all the settings that D&D has ever officially had, I think is the one most suited to the kind of whimsy and also random that makes up 5th edition D&D as it has developed over time. But it's Wizards. It's always a very professional layout and art and everything. I just don't particularly like this style. In terms of substance, the basics are there throughout the books, but overall it is severely lacking, particularly the Astral Adventurer's Guide. Boo's Astral Menagerie, I can't really fault that much. Yeah, it's monsters. It does what it says on the tin. So, scores then. Style. Normally, I would have to give any Wizards product a sort of 3 or 4 in terms of style score out of 5. I like the Vaporwave covers and things. The interior, not so much. I can't give it a 4, which I will probably normally err towards when doing Wizards, because the internal style, the art director has failed to give Spelljammer, at least internally to the books, its own distinct style, its own visual language going through it. Covers, they're great, but otherwise, meh. So style 3 out of 5. Just because it's Wizards. They have the money, they have the talent. You know, it's good presentation. It's just not good for this. In terms of substance, I mean, there is some usable material here, but it's largely limited to Boo's Astral Menagerie and a handful of pages with new races and character options and so on in the main book. However, so that the bare minimum, that's less than average. It's enough to play. That would give it a 2 out of 5 for substance. But because the things that are really important to Spelljammer are missing or skimmed over or not gone into, I have to drop that substance score to a 1. Yeah, it's the bare minimum. Alright, so that is 3 for style, 1 for substance, 4 out of 10, 2 out of 5, subpar. Unless you are a collector, unless you are a huge Spelljammer fan, I don't think you should bother. Indeed, if you are a huge Spelljammer fan, I think you'll just be disappointed. Honestly, if you loved the old Spelljammer, I would go and pick up Starfinder, which is far more full service, detailed, just generally better, and then dial up the comedy and so on at your table. You might be even able, due to the sort of D20 mutual background that the games have, you might even be able to wangle the ship creation rules and so on from Starfinder to make ships for Spelljammer. That might be a good idea. But yeah, Starfinder is a much underappreciated game, certainly compared to this. So, yeah, capsule review, recap. 4 out of 10, 2 out of 5, buy Starfinder instead. Zang.
Aren't you a little tired of so-called horror media about shiny, sparkly, angsty, whiny monsters? I know I am, and that's why I created actual fucking monsters. where you will play an actual fucking monster, doing horrible and monstrous things and being tracked down and killed for it. Buy now at DriveThruRPG, post-mort.com or lulu.com.